Annyeonghaseyo. My name is Matt. I'm with Stumptown Coffee. I think we need to go back to the beginning on the slide here, all the way to the beginning, real quick. Let's see. I could take us back. There, that's my whole presentation. Very quickly. Okay. So my name is Matt Lounsbury. I'm with Stumptown Coffee Roasters. We're based out of Portland, Oregon, in the United States. And under the premise of paradigm shifts and also sustainability, the World Coffee Forum asked me to speak. And when I thought about how I would approach that, one of the things that really stands out to me, I've been with the company for over 11 years, almost 12 years in April. And one of the things that keeps me coming to work at Stumptown every day and keeps me excited about helping the business grow is the fact that I feel that Stumptown is a sustainable business, both within the coffee industry but also the world at large in terms of business. And so one of the third pillars of sustainability being economics, thought I would talk about Stumptown and our business model as a sustainable business. And I would like to do that both in terms of, I think it's important to tell our story and talk about how we got here, but also I'm going to explain some of the ways that we see ourselves evolving and growing, and how this broader industry as a whole, we think is, through our lens, is starting to shape up. So our story. So I'll start by taking you guys all the way back. Stumptown just turned 15 years old last 2 weeks ago, November 1st. We're now a 15-year-old company. We started as one coffee shop in the outer neighborhood of southeast Portland. Portland is a pretty small town compared to Seoul. And in 1999, there was very, very little, if none, specialty coffee happening in Portland, Oregon at the time. And this is a picture of our first coffee bar that we opened on Southeast Division Street in 1999. And we started, our owner and founder, Dwayne, took over an old hair salon that our most popular coffee right now. First of all, how many people in this room have heard of Stumptown Coffee? Raise your hand. Okay, good. So this might be an interesting story, it might not. Well, we have our most popular coffee is called Hairbender. And if you notice right here, Hairbender was the name of a beauty salon that existed on Southeast Division Street. And if you'll also notice right here, at some point in time, the Hairbender beauty salon burned down. And Dwayne, our owner and founder, took over that space, remodeled it with some friends on a very small budget, saved up, took all the money that he had earned working as a barista, and saved up money to buy his first roaster, which you'll see here. We still have this roaster today, by the way, and it is currently, to my knowledge, the oldest working roaster of its kind in North America. And we have it at our headquarters, and we use it to roast really, really small batches of coffee, usually really expensive coffees. So we started in 1999 in this little coffee bar on Southeast Division Street. So again, we were founded by Dwayne Sorensen. Dwayne Sorensen got his start in the coffee industry in Seattle, Washington. Again, a place that was known as an early pioneer in what we now know of as third wave coffee. And basically set his sights on Portland, Oregon as a place that did not have any of that going on, but also still culturally a really unique spot in the Pacific Northwest. We now today have 9 standalone coffee bars, and I'll talk more about each one of those in a moment. 4 of them in Portland, 2 in Seattle, 2 now in New York City, and 1 in Los Angeles. And I think the thing that I also want to do today is to tell you a little bit of what we're known for and what's gotten us here, but also do some explaining about our story as we tell it to people that may not know it, may not have raised their hand before. And I'm going to make the case of how, we talked a little bit earlier about connoisseurship And I think one of the important things of the evolution of our niche within the specialty coffee industry is really helping guide people to that connoisseurship and that appreciation of really, really specialty, truly special coffees. And I'm hopefully going to make the case today that I see it becoming a real thing, not just in the United States, but also worldwide. So we're known for pioneering the idea, or us and a couple other companies in the States are known for pioneering the idea of working directly with coffee farmers. It's a really simple model. I'll talk more about it in a minute, but just in short, we go down and work face-to-face with coffee producers, and we ask for the best quality coffee, and in exchange, pay the highest prices we can for that coffee. So we roast our coffee by hand on site in all of our 4 roasting markets, which include Portland, Seattle, New York, and now Los Angeles. Our coffee is served in cafes throughout the country, but also now increasingly in other parts of the world, very selectively. So we're a wholesaler as well as a retailer, and we're working continuously to try and expand our online presence. But I'm going to speak more about sort of our business model on the wholesale side after I tell you a little bit about the retail, and then try and get into how we see this evolving. So we are known for, in our eyes or others, I think one of the things that we're doing in the United States is us and a handful of other roasters are known for raising the bar for quality and a quality coffee experience. Our owner and founder started Stumptown with the idea that everyone should have an amazing coffee experience, whether it's Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, or Seoul, Korea. And everyone deserves that opportunity to have a great coffee experience. We're very heavily focused currently in West and East Coast cities in the United States in terms of our wholesale customer base. We believe, and part of what I'm going to talk about further, is that the consumer's taste for coffee is evolving very, very fast. And some of the common thread in the previous presentations, whether it's connoisseurship or value, we believe that is happening, and I'm going to talk about how I see that in my own eyes expanding the business. One of the things that we're always really big on in terms of our own approach to working with customers and customers' customers and people that are in our cafes or our customers that we sell to is an emphasis on hospitality and the idea of taking care of people. So we have, like I said, 9 cafes in the United States. Many of the people in our industry are very focused on retail and heavily investing in opening up lots and lots of retail cafes. I would say that that's not our strategy. We tend to be really selective about the number of cafes that we open. But when we do, each one of our cafes is very unique. They're all in very different neighborhoods. Typically, they've been in markets and neighborhoods that were on the verge of becoming something that they weren't at the time that we signed a lease, and then a couple of years later became really interesting, dynamic neighborhoods. All of our cafes are very different. So in Portland, that's our foundation. That's where we started. We started on Division Street in Southeast Portland, and very organic, very neighborhood, family-type cafes. Then moved downtown to our downtown cafe, and then through a partnership with the Ace Hotel, opened up at the Ace Hotel, and then we also in 2005, along the way, opened up a tasting room that we called the Annex, when before there was the concept of cupping coffee with people. We were doing it every day with the public for free. So Portland is our home, but it's really our home base as we expand the business. We have 2 cafes in Seattle and a roastery there that we open, both of which are on Capitol Hill in really, really unique neighborhoods that are changing rapidly in a city that's growing, and it's got a lot of things going on. It's been really, really interesting to see what's happening on Capitol Hill in Seattle, and it's been a very fun thing to be a part of that whole experience. In New York City, we just recently opened up a cafe in the West Village. We have 2 cafes in Manhattan, and we roast in Brooklyn, one of which is in the Ace Hotel, again, a key partnership for us globally as well. And then we just opened up in the West Village, and you can see this shop right here is an old bookshop from the Beat generation in the 50s that we went and took over and trying to bring it back to life. But every one of our cafes is is unique and in a different neighborhood. So we try to design them differently. This is our cafe in Los Angeles, which is also a roastery. You can see sort of that this is the sort of the interior of the cafe that looks into this is the roastery. And LA being a warm weather market, we have a nice patio that we have available, and it's in a part of LA, downtown. If any of you have been to LA recently or have plans to go, you should go to downtown LA. It's going through a really fast revitalization, which, by the way, I should point out that most of our cafes are in neighborhoods that were once 50 or 100 years ago were very vibrant communities and kind of went away. But then as they came back, a lot of times one of the first businesses to bring back some of the neighborhoods that we've been a part of or our customers have been a part of are coffee shops. And whether it's a coffee shop and then a restaurant and then all of a sudden a movie theater, but a lot of these older established neighborhoods have come back because of coffee shops. So that's our cafes. We're also really known, as I mentioned, for our work with producers. There's been a lot of talk already today about producers. But for us, just about everybody on this matrix right here, I have a personal relationship with. I'm not our green coffee buyer. I'm the head of sort of the day-to-day operations. We've got 2 people that all they do is travel the world, and they're probably gone 6 out of every 8 weeks traveling in support of our relationships with our coffee farmers. It's our approach to working with people, as I mentioned directly, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But we believe that coffee producers are the backbone of our business. And without them, we would not be where we are today. When I said before that we're known for being a part of being really innovative and pioneering in terms of our work with coffee producers, the flip side of that is a lot of our coffee producers are now known for being really innovative and pioneering in terms of their work with roasters, starting with us. So they're really, really important part of what we do. We're also really well known, and one of the things that's near and dear to my heart is our culture, our people. We like to hire people that we like to hang out with. We like to hire people, it's a figure of speech, but we like to hire people that we'd like to have a beer with. We like to hire people that you want to have lunch with or you want to have dinner with. And in turn, as we've grown, Stumptown has 270 employees, but I can still say without question across the board, whether you're a barista or a delivery driver or a green coffee buyer or a production manager, all those people are really, really interesting people. As it turns out as well, most of these people also have really unique lives outside of work. Many of our staff are either full-time musicians or artists outside of work, and we don't intentionally do that so we have hipsters, as they would say, working for us, but it's a result of really trying to find interesting and passionate people. And that's what keeps a lot of us coming back to Stumptown every day to work. The craft of roasting is something that's always been really important to us. We still, to this day, use Probat roasting machines. We roast every coffee by hand. We have at any given time 30 to 40 different coffees on our menu, most single origins, a few blends, and we treat every single one of those coffees differently based on how it behaves in the roasting machine. And there's a lot of work involved with doing it that way. We have 7 different roasting machines across the country. We have, at any given time, 14 or 15 different roasters. And so it's a lot of work to make sure that all of those single origin coffees are presented to the world properly, and that each one of those origins that we talked about and all the unique characteristics that go into each one of those coffees comes out to the light and in the cup. We have a unique approach that is not exclusive to us, but it's something we will always maintain our commitment to as we grow. Stumptown has a self-policing internal scoring mechanism that it's not new to the coffee world on a scale of 1 to 100, but we use our own sort of internal guide to determine what grade we give a coffee. We only buy coffees that are an 86 or above. But in addition to that, we continue to look for those scores among our existing relationships with the producers to get even better. And then in turn, we pay better prices, so it's a win-win for everybody. But in order to do that, we have a really serious commitment to quality. We have a full-time team of people that all they do is cup coffee all day long. both in terms of evaluating green coffee to decide what we're either going to buy or what we're going to pay for coffee that we've agreed to purchase, but then almost more importantly, to make sure that each and every one of those coffees that we roast is consistent across all of our roasters, is consistent across all of our coffees, and consistent across all of our markets. So our approach to quality is unique. We have a full-time quality control team that's all they do is grade and evaluate coffee all day long and taste coffee. So this is a little bit of a graphic in terms of how we see everything kind of tying together, a bit cartoony, if you will, but one of the things that I'm trying to do today is to show you, as we go out into the world and help explain that we really think that quality matters and that it's important for people to pay attention to quality. I think it's important that we make sure that we tell that story simply so that people can understand it and give them the opportunity to be educated about coffee. And so as I go forward, I'm going to explain to you how we explain to others, not just about Stumptown and our story, but about how we see the coffee industry and the niche that we're in getting bigger and becoming more meaningful. So for us, it's very much about the producers. Without them, we wouldn't be here. With that, we try every step of the way to influence the process. We spend at least 2 or 3 trips a year, if we can, with our core relationships with producers, trying to influence that process so that in turn, we get better coffee that next year, and in turn, for that, they get a better price for the coffee. Roasting, I already mentioned, we have a really dedicated approach to the craft. We're very serious about it. If you were to go into any one of our roasteries, which if you're ever in Portland, Oregon, Seattle, New York, or LA, you are welcome to come to our roastery. We give tours every day. And then in turn, also what we've talked about with Mr. Illy is the final process, the cup. We have 10 people in our company that all they do is train people on how to prepare coffee. So if you're a company and you want to work with Stumptown, you come in and spend the whole entire day with us, or we will come out to you and spend the entire day with you to show you how to prepare our coffee properly, and that's free. It's been a big, important part of our evolution, but it's also been a worthwhile investment on Stumptown's end to make sure that all that other stuff that goes into the coffee, all of this, doesn't go out the window in 25 seconds because a barista somewhere in a city somewhere doesn't care about the coffee. So we are also known, and I get a lot of questions, even since yesterday I've gotten a lot of questions about this. Like I said, we have 9 cafes in the country, which is not very many. And those cafes are very much our living rooms, and we want to show people how good coffee can be. But in a lot of cases, Stumptown is known for our approach to working with customers. And our wholesale business is our fastest growing part of our business, and it's definitely a core focus for us as we continue to expand as a company. And so while it's interesting to open up coffee bars, and it is a lot of fun, it's also very expensive and sometimes hard to do. So we tend to do that very selectively and use those retail coffee bars as a showcase for our wholesale. So Stumptown and our approach to wholesaling is very what I would call hands-on. We are probably many coffee shops, many bakeries, many grocery stores work with lots of different vendors and providers of things, and we consider ourselves to be the most hands-on vendor that they'll have. In many cases, our sales reps who take care of Stumptown Coffee spend a lot of their time turning customers down who want to use Stumptown Coffee. And that's not because we want to turn people away as much as we really want to make sure that all the things that I mentioned before are taken care of, and we got to make sure that people who are working with our coffee care about coffee. Because as we've heard here today already, quality is very much an undercurrent, and it's also arguably the biggest measure of the success of this whole thing. So we're really big on wholesale. As we go out to the world, one of the terms that you haven't heard today, but I think we've all heard it many, many times. For us, we kind of avoided this term for a while, but then realized you kind of have to call it something. And so as we've gone out to different groups of people who are starting to pay attention to specialty coffee or super special coffee or craft coffee or whatever you want to call it, which we'll get into in a minute, you have to call it something. So we have found a very simple way to explain this by using someone else's words. This is a quote from Oliver Strand from the New York Times. I won't read the whole thing. But simply put, we all know that we all have our own understandings of the first wave, the second wave, and the third wave, but as we go out and talk to people, it's important for us to, again, put it in simple terms so that people can understand it, and then move on to being more on the connoisseurship level, if you will. So by our definition, how we would explain it is third wave roasters, if you will, craft roasting, whatever you want to call it, typically take into account three major factors. For us, direct trade is an important thing. Working directly with coffee farmers, people that actually have coffee buyers that go out to the farms, visit with the farmers, and make purchases based on how that quality exists, and also reward farmers accordingly. Craft, people that are passionate and care about the approaches that I mentioned earlier. And then also that emphasize quality, a progressive product. In our case, all three of these things, the model is very simple because the expectation for us with coffee producers and also with our customers is that it gets better every year, that it's progressive. And therefore, as a company I've been with the company for almost 12 years, and the coffee has only gotten better. As I'm a coffee drinker myself, and I was just talking with Rick over lunch, and I'm increasingly spoiled by our coffees, so much so that when I travel, I almost always have to find and seek out a Stumptown coffee shop if I can. But for us, third wave roasters typically take these three measures into account. Direct trade as a mission, it's also important to kind of tell people what that's all about. We feel like direct trade, there's a lot of people, there are many companies using this term now, and I think there's a danger in overusing this term. But for us to explain, again, to you how we explain it to others, companies, roasters that are focused on coffee quality, again, that go out and work with producers with the idea of incentive-based rewards, that we're actually giving people higher prices based on cup quality. And we also are showing them and telling them the scores from our coffee and explaining to them there are years, many times, where we decide not to buy a producer's coffee because it didn't score as well as it did the year before. Or we decide that we're not able to give them a higher price because the coffee is not as good as it was the year before. And we're very transparent about that entire step of the process. Our product lineup, for a lot of you that know Stumptown, this has continued to evolve over the years. When I started at Stumptown, we had 4 coffees on the menu. We had Hairbender, Holler Mountain, 5 in a decaf, and then we had a Kenyan and a Guatemalan. A Kenyan and a Guatemalan. Now we have 30 to 40 single origin coffees at any given time on our menu, and a wide variety of coffees from all the 3 major growing regions. Many of those coffees are organic, some aren't, and a lot of them are micro-lot blends, and micro-lot being a term that gets used a lot, but for us it's encouraging our producers to focus in on the best of the best lots of coffee and affect that process to influence those decisions to make sure that they're giving us the best lots possible, and we can in turn give them the best price for that coffee. We're known for our handcrafted espresso drinks in our cafes, and also our customers are known for that as well. And then we brew the coffee and roast the coffee in a way that expresses all those profiles. And this is also a product that I won't talk much about, but in the last 3 years has become very real, and that's cold brew. I'm giving a technical session on Friday about cold brew if anybody wants to attend. We'll talk more about that, but it's a category or a market that has really exploded over the last 3 years, and we have a few products that we've put into the market, but at the end of the day, ready-to-drink coffee is a part of what we do now, and that didn't exist 5 years ago, and we're taking it very seriously. Our customers are people that appreciate quality and style. Sometimes it's very hard to slow down and look at who your customer base is, and in fact, still to this day, at every one of our coffee bars and in every one of our markets, it's very different. But when we do try to summarize it and simplify it, I think it's people that are focused on health, are educated, are conscientious. They view coffee as an experience, hopefully. They value independence, and they believe that it's worth paying for what matters. And that's a theme that I'll come back to in a moment. So back to the wholesale part of a large degree of Stumptown's growth has been in the wholesale area, meaning we sell coffee to coffee shops, restaurants, bakeries, grocery stores, other people. And it's been a lot of fun over the years to see, since I came on, I've helped a majority of this happen with Stumptown. It's been an area that I've focused, and it's been fun. It's been fun to help other people grow their business and seeing people open up second and third locations. Even during recessions throughout the United States, people have been able to kind of scrap together, inform partnerships around opening up second and third restaurants, second and third coffee shops. And coffee has been something that's been very resilient through the 10 years that I've been involved with the business. But if I had to describe who those customers are, very much artisans, very much entrepreneurs. A lot of the people we work with are taking risks, and we're helping them. We're trying to take the work out of the coffee for them by educating them, providing technical services through our training department, as well as our service department that takes care of the equipment. But we're also, these are people that are involved with a very real phenomenon happening right now in the United States, but I would argue all over the world, with people's preference for local and regional taste and products. People that are paying attention to seasonal food, people that are paying attention to craft beer and good wine and asking where they come from. And it's very real right now, and I think that's very much a part of where coffee is going. Also, a big foundation of our growth is entering new channels of business. Starting to work, if you look on here, this can't really see it very well, but if you looked at this pie, this is sort of bread and butter coffee shops, traditional places that you would find espresso and coffee drinks. And that's, still a majority of our customer base. But if you were to look at this as grocery, if you were to look at this slide 3-4 years ago, it would have been half that. And if you were to look at that slide 3 or 4 years before that, it would have been half that. So we're starting to see this pie, if you will, leveling out. And ultimately, it's a good thing. It means that more and more people are starting to pay attention to really good coffee. So I've said the word thing many, many times, and I have it in quotation mark because this thing is being called a lot of different things. Whether you call it craft, boutique, artisanal, third wave, I'll throw in there because it gets used a lot, specialty, which is obviously we know specialty is a much broader term, but it gets used to kind of define the niche that we're in. But I think one of the things that we've had to do is settle on something as we've gone out to educate others and talk about what's happening out there in the world and what we see happening next. We've tended to zero in on this idea of super premium. And so I'm going to talk for a few minutes about how we see super premium coffee growing, evolving, and also being very much a real part of the growth of the specialty coffee market. So a year, 2 years ago, many people were using the word third wave, and I think what I saw over the last 2 or 3 years is as people would mention that, they would think of it as, oh, that's kind of cute, or that's interesting, or that's very boutique-y, and they thought of third wave as almost a really, really isolated, small, super precious experience. And I think a big part of that is because one of the dangers in the growth of our niche in specialty coffee is that we assume that people are already hyper-educated about coffee or already are connoisseurs. Whereas I feel like our job, very much for the next year and has been for the last year, is to tell people how to become connoisseurs of coffee and to do it very simply. But one of the things that I do know is that where 2 years ago, there was maybe question of whether or not this thing called third wave was going to pan out, I think in the last 6 months, I'm more on the optimism side of this part of the equation, coming from the business lens. We truly believe that this third wave thing is here to stay. And some examples in the United States, I knew when my father, called me up 3 weeks ago to say, hey, I saw Stumptown on Nightline last night. That's really interesting. I've been working in coffee for 11 years, and my father still thinks I work at a coffee shop. But when he saw Nightline, he knew that this thing that I was doing was starting to become more real. Or when USA Today says the artisanal, bold future of coffee is here to stay, then I think we're on to something. What I think defines this, and what I've seen through my own eyes as I travel a lot, I spend a lot of time, I've helped open up all of our roasting markets in the United States, and I've traveled a lot internationally. And really in the last 2 years, for me, this thing has become very real because of what's happened in food and beverage. Coffee is very much right on the heels of that. So when people start to pay attention and start to support innovative restaurants, start to purchase craft beer, start to think about different experiences with food and beverage, coffee is right behind that. And I think what we're seeing now in the United States, and arguably in Korea, in Japan, in other parts of the world, in Australia for sure, is these major metropolitan cities that did not have an independent coffee option or experience 2-3 years ago. This has been the year where they have started to get independent coffee shops. And if they didn't last year, next year will be the year, this year will be the year where we genuinely are seeing people start to pay attention to super premium, craft, third wave coffee shops, whatever you want to call it. And it's happening. Places, so we roast coffee in those major cities that I told you about, but what we started to see is those secondary cities, places like Washington, D.C., Boston, Philadelphia, San Francisco arguably has been doing it for a while. Los Angeles, very much so, even though it's a big city, is very new to coffee, but it's exploding. Texas, Dallas, Houston, Austin, all these places, people are starting to really pay attention to coffee. And as a result, you have a much more meaningful presence of local coffee shops in neighborhoods that did not otherwise have it. So for me, that's a heavy indicator. Then another indicator for me is about 3 months ago, even though for many years, there's 2 people in this room who 5 years ago, 3 years ago, called me up for me to sell them coffee in Korea, and I had to turn them down because really we're all about freshness and there was no way we could get the coffee there. Well, guess what? This thing has become so popular that people are willing to do whatever they can to figure out a way to get Stumptown coffee in Korea. And as of 3 months ago, we now have our first wholesale customer in Seoul. And it's actually a customer in LA that decided to expand to Seoul. And it's been really exciting, and they're very, very busy, and it's been fun to participate and see what that market is like through their eyes. But it's real. We're also seeing new channels of business develop for super premium or craft coffee, and where previously really good coffee could only be found in super specialty grocery stores in the United States, we're starting to see some of the bigger chains bringing on specialty coffee as a set, because they have long, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, but it's a trend. Investment. Many of you are probably aware that companies similar to Stumptown have been bringing on lots of different types of investors, be it private equity or venture capital. It's been happening very, very rapidly in the last 2 years. We brought on an investment partner 3 or 4 years ago, and it seemed like right after we did that, pretty much every one of our competitors did something similar. And the whole idea is that we feel confident in what we're doing, and we want to grow it, and we want to do it meaningfully and with scale. And in order to do that, you need investment. Press, I already mentioned that really if you look at the last year, probably across the world, specialty coffee has been something that it's become popular. It's been, it used to be just the food networks and the chef shows were what are popular and people paying attention to those kind of things. And now really neat coffee bars that have opened in neighborhoods are making headlines on local papers, and all the way up to USA Today paying attention to it, or Nightline. In scale, This is the year where I have seen and will continue to see companies like ourselves be serious about growing nationally, regionally, nationally, internationally in some cases. There are a number of people who we would call competitors, but also friends of ours that are coming to Asia. And obviously that market, Korea being no exception, is very receptive. And the idea is to grow this thing. So the concept for us, super premium, what does that mean? Really, it means that we're talking about food and beverage. A lot of people forget that coffee is a beverage. When they talk about the broader beverage world, they think of beer and wine, and then coffee is this other sort of category in and of it to itself, but it's a beverage. So it's important to look at coffee as part of the food and beverage world. And what I'm going to talk about is our experiences over the last 10 years, and really specific over the last year and going into next year, about how we see the premiumization, if you will, of coffee starting to really, really evolve. So super premium for us, very simply, is we feel like it means it's worth paying for what matters. Whether you're choosing to spend your only $5 that you might spend that entire day at a special coffee shop instead of a larger chain, whether you're at the grocery store and you're starting to understand that the difference between just paying a couple more dollars for a six-pack of beer or a bottle of wine, we feel like the same applies for coffee, that it's worth paying for what matters. And keeping it simple in terms of the consumer experience is sort of helpful to us as we kind of guide ourselves to the evolution of the business, but also stay true to our core as focused on quality. So one of the things that's happened in the coffee industry is people always make analogies to other industries. Many times people talk about the relationship between coffee and wine, and we certainly all feel like that's true in terms of coffee coming from places that have a language very similar in terms of tasting notes and how you describe what you're tasting, but also in terms of how coffee grows. There's a lot of similarities with terroir and the concept of coffee and microclimates and all those things that are applicable. But one of the things that we have tried to do is focus on how other analogies in food and beverage have happened over the last 10 and 15 years, and also what we can learn from them. And one of the first ones is we have recently, over the last 3 to 4 years, brought on members of our team who have experience in beer and wine, but more particularly beer. Just, I think between 3 of our team members, we have, in our senior management team, we've had 3 people that have a combined total of 40 years of experience in the beer industry. And I never thought I would learn more about how craft beer has evolved than I have until today. But craft beer and cheese, there's a lot to learn. Craft beer, if you look at it, the way that they've grown, even in the last 5 years, has been pretty unbelievable. But also really, if you look at what craft beer has done in the last 8 to 10 years in the United States, it's really remarkable. So as a beer drinker myself, 6 years ago, you could only get truly craft beer if you went into the super specialty grocery stores or a specialty beer market. Nowadays, and this is happening rapidly across the country, most decent grocery stores have an immense craft beer section. And that's happened very, very quickly, really in the last 5 years. And so what we're showing as the sort of 25th percentile in terms of price versus the 75th percentile, you can see that since 2009, the 25th percentile has hardly grown at all. So products like Budweiser, things that maybe people in this room don't know, but just major big label conventional beer has stayed relatively flat, whereas craft beer has exploded. And I think for us, as we start to think about ways to identify with premium or super premium products, along with that went the whole notion of what people would pay for a six-pack of beer. So when 5, 6, 7 years ago, people expected to pay $4 or $5 for a six-pack of beer. Now people are very open to the idea of paying $9, $10, $11 for a six-pack, and in many cases, people are paying $10 to $20 for a bottle of 22-ounce beer, and not thinking twice about it. And so for us, and the rate at which that happened, we feel like there's a lot of parallels to thinking about how that happened, and where coffee might have the potential to head, at least super premium coffee, and how quickly. Cheese also, same learning experience in terms of specialty or gourmet cheese. The gap from value to premium has grown 9%, or 9 points, and is currently at an 118% premium. So very similar analogies to that, where bagged coffee, and a lot of this is based on information that I'm about to show, a lot of it is based on information from grocery stores, because that's where a lot of people shop for these products. Before I came to work in coffee, I shopped for coffee at a grocery store. I would say still to this day, most people buy their coffee at a grocery store. They don't think of coffee shops or restaurants or cafes as places to buy coffee, and that's changing, but it's a really good model for thinking about how consumers approach a category, or in this case, super premium. And bagged coffee, the gap from value to premium has decreased 7 points. A lot of that has to do with the macro brands, or the sort of cheaper coffee, if you will, just continuing to be on the shelf. And what we see happening is there's a huge decline in ground coffee, pre-ground coffee, and a lot of that has to do with K-Cup that we'll talk about in a moment. But where, again, a lot of opportunity for growth for us in this analogy. So what do we learn from looking at craft beer and craft cheese? The market will support quality. We genuinely believe that as a company, or else we wouldn't be here. Beer and cheese has taught us there's huge opportunity for premium coffee, not just in coffee shops. I think a lot of times when we think about the specialty niche that Stumptown plays and the growth of that niche, we think of coffee shops, but if we really want to think about the future, we need to also think about where people purchase products, and it's not always in coffee shops. The other analogy is that when we start thinking about back to Rick's presentation, about what sort of influences we can have in coffee, is nothing's ever going to change unless people are willing to pay more for it. So one of the things we've started to do is to think of it in terms of an extra 25 cents a pound for green makes a huge impact in a producer's life. But what does that translate to? Maybe an extra $2 a bag of coffee. And what is the impact that has, both in ensuring where your coffee comes from and knowing that you're buying a really transparently great product, but also you're getting better quality, and it's worth paying for what matters. And many people are increasingly paying attention to where their products come from. So what these products have taught us is that people are willing to pay $1, $2, $3 more dollars for a unit, and coffee is no exception. So our job is to build this segment out. And this is a very simple slide, but what we did was we took our own backyard of Portland, Oregon, and where for the last 10, 11 years, we've had really great experiences working with partners like Whole Foods and New Seasons Market, who've done an excellent job of educating consumers about food and getting them to pay for what matters. And they've been very valuable partners for us, both regionally in Portland, Oregon, but also as we've expanded the business nationally. They've helped us scale, and we've helped them create a coffee category that we feel like is viable. But what we did was we took a look at outside of specialty grocery, and we said, what would it look like if we started to extend selectively to some places that weren't specialty grocers, that might be conventional? And what the nice thing was is we found that there were some conventional grocers in the Northwest that were following the trends. Like I said before, people are very much paying attention to, it's very hard to ignore, the trends that are happening in food and beverage, both nationally and internationally. And believe me, the large players are paying attention. And so what we have started to see with the Northwest has traditionally been sort of an experiment experimental market, and people have, when they want to try these concepts out, being an organic approach or a specialty or a marketplace concept, a lot of times they will do that in Portland, Oregon. And so we saw some of these larger national conventional grocers willing to take a chance, and they called us up. And the first thing they said was, how come you guys have never called on us? And I won't say any names, but you can think of many of you who have shopped in the United States, but insert a European or an Asian model, and it's a big grocery store. And they came to us and said, how come you've never talked to us? And we said, we've just been really busy, and we've been really focused on selling coffee to people that care about coffee. And when I go into your grocery store right now, I now see that your craft beer aisle is huge. And that's changed in the last 5 years, even though you're a big grocery store. But your coffee section is terrible and is not contemporary. Oh, and by the way, you are here in the Pacific Northwest. You should probably make your coffee section better. And a couple of these people said, okay, help us do that. And so over the last 2 years, we've been telling this story to some of these folks, and they've been listening, and they've been engaging us and others in the process of helping them improve their coffee set. And so this is just from the Portland, Oregon market, from a conventional grocer perspective, big grocery store that has a couple of big grocery stores that had decided selectively to make better coffee sets in their store. So make their coffee set be more like their cheese or their gourmet beer and wine section. And this is the last 26 weeks worth of data, and it's a lot of data, and I'm not sure if you can see it. But really what this says is, in terms of points for distribution, that with 1/5 of the distribution, meaning all the other players on this market have 4 to 5 times the distribution we do in the Portland market, we've become the number 3 brand. So with those hand-picked, selected experiments, if you will, of larger grocery retailers that wanted to create a more craft coffee experience, third wave, super premium, this is the results. In the last 26 weeks, we've become the number 3 brand, more or less just by being on the shelf. And we're helping them curate that experience because we can't do this alone. Very much a theme of what I'm going to continue to talk about is that we need better players in this category to continue to elevate that whole experience. But you can see it's working. This is another way to look at it in terms of, again, the Portland market. But the whole bean segment is growing at 4% in Portland. Nationally, it's down 8%. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But the number 1 area of growth in whole bean in this market is in the category that's $12 and above. So what we're seeing happen, and as we talk to these other roasters who are thinking about how they grow, other brands that are working with retailers, what we're seeing happen is there's not a day goes by that someone doesn't bring up the K-Cup to me. And we've already heard a little bit about it earlier, and someone last night said, are you guys going to do the K-Cup? And really what's happening is the K-Cup is driving is driving this down 8%. That's because of the K-Cup. But what's happening is on the whole bean shelf is ground coffee is going away. And we're seeing all these different retailers start to focus in small incremental steps on more super premium coffee. But as they do that, they're providing a convenience option in the K-Cup. People that just want what they want, and that business is obviously growing rapidly. But then there's this other thing, this super premium experience that is also growing. And so what this chart says is that the fastest growing segment of this whole thing is coffee that's $12 and above. And that's just based on publicly available data that we're really just getting started with. And the last point is, you don't know what you don't know, which means this is information available to us and everyone that's only scanned through conventional grocery stores. This does not account all the other grocery stores in the world that have already been doing great jobs selling really great specialty products. So my hunch is that the story is even more compelling than what you see up here. But for us, it makes us want to keep going. And it makes us excited about how fast it can go. And it also makes us excited about how real this opportunity in super premium coffee is. So for us, what does this mean? A lot of the improvements that I think have yet to be made in addressing some of the challenges that Rick laid out earlier today are dependent on coffee growers being able to sell more of their coffee. They're dependent on some of the solutions being in place and coming about so that we can deal with some of the challenges on the agricultural level, for sure. Climate change is real. But you also have to sell coffee at the end of the day in order for those coffee producers to be successful. A lot of times people say to us, how big are you going to get? Stumptown is still pretty small by the global coffee world standards. We still represent a very small percentage niche, 99.9th percentile, I would argue. But with some of these trends that we've laid out here, we feel like it can change very fast. And the concept of being mainstream, not as a brand, but as a concept, third wave coffee, craft coffee, super premium, deserves to be mainstream. It deserves to be everywhere. The thing that we can all be in agreement about in the last two presentations and all the presentations going forward is that just about everybody drinks coffee. Just about. And everybody deserves a great experience if they want to have it. And right now, the landscape has never been better for people to, in the very near future, have that opportunity to have a great coffee experience. And so I think the table is set for people to be willing to pay a couple extra dollars for that bag of coffee that so much work went into and has such an amazing story, and the relationship is there with the roaster and the producer, and the prices have been paid. The records may have been set for the amount of money ever paid in that country for that coffee at Green, and the coffee was roasted to perfection. But it doesn't matter unless people are willing to pay for it, and I truly believe, we believe as a company, that the time has never been more ripe for people to care enough to pay. In order for that to happen, it's going to take a lot of players in our category, not just in Portland, Oregon, but regionally in the Northwest, in the West Coast, in the Northeast, in the Midwest, but also nationally and internationally. I see the trend in places like Seoul, Korea, and there's 1,000 new coffee bars opened up last year. I just heard that. There are 850 micro roasters in Seoul. That is very real. And I think building on that momentum is important, and it's going to take more players in this super premium or craft space in coffee. But along the way, we cannot compromise on quality. Everyone who's going to be involved in that process has to make sure that they stay focused on that they don't decide they're going to invest a little bit too far into their brand and not necessarily the relationships and therefore the quality and the coffee that they're purchasing, or in the process by which they roast the coffee or distribute the coffee. Because really, I could make the case for over and over again that this category, if you will, exists because of quality. So to me, what this means is the future is hopeful. It can happen very, very fast, and it's becoming more and more real every day. But we have to make sure we are focused on quality along the way. And so I ask everyone here, as one of the charges before, who is involved with businesses that are selling coffee or roasting coffee or importing coffee or trying to grow their own business that's related to coffee, to think about how you fit into this landscape and know that there is a market there to support quality, and do everything you can to invest in your part of the supply chain and make sure that you're meeting it halfway. So that concludes my portion of the presentation.